There are moments in life that reveal the truth about who people really are when they think no one important is watching. What happened on Family Feud one afternoon in October 2024 would expose a betrayal so shocking that it left Steve Harvey struggling to maintain his composure, the studio audience in stunned silence, and millions of viewers witnessing the exact moment when one woman's world fell apart on live television. When 38-year-old contestant Rebecca Hamilton stepped up to play Fast Money, she had no idea that her husband of 12 years was about to walk out of that studio with another woman, proving that sometimes the biggest battles we face are not against strangers, but against the people we trusted most. Before we dive into this heartbreaking but ultimately inspiring story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you never miss these powerful moments that remind us about the importance of dignity, self-worth, and knowing your value even when others fail to see it. The Peterson family from Charlotte, North Carolina had traveled to Los Angeles for what they believed would be a fun family experience on America's favorite game show. Rebecca Hamilton stood with her family members, radiating nervous excitement about the opportunity to compete. She wore an emerald green dress that her husband Marcus had told her looked beautiful when she tried it on that morning. Her auburn hair was styled in soft waves, and her smile was genuine as she waited for the game to begin. Standing in the audience section reserved for family supporters was Marcus Hamilton, Rebecca's husband of 12 years, a 40-year-old insurance executive who had seemed supportive and encouraging when Rebecca's family was selected for the show. Next to Marcus sat a blonde woman in her late 20s who had been introduced to everyone as Danielle, supposedly a colleague from Marcus's office who happened to be in Los Angeles for a business conference and wanted to see the Family Feud taping. Rebecca Hamilton was 38 years old, a dedicated elementary school teacher who had spent the last 14 years shaping young minds in the Charlotte public school system. She taught third grade and was known for her patience, creativity, and genuine care for every student who entered her classroom. Former students would often return years later to thank her for being the teacher who believed in them when others had given up. Rebecca's own parents had divorced when she was young, and she had promised herself that when she found the right person and got married, she would do everything possible to make that marriage work and create the stable, loving home she had wished for as a child. She had met Marcus Hamilton when she was 26 years old, working her second year as a teacher and taking graduate courses at night to earn her master's degree in education. Marcus had been charming, successful, and attentive during their courtship. He worked in insurance sales and was rapidly climbing the corporate ladder. They had married after dating for 2 years, and Rebecca had believed she had found her partner for life. They had built what appeared from the outside to be a solid middle-class life together. They owned a modest home in a good school district, drove reliable cars, and participated in their community. But what family, friends, and casual observers did not see was the gradual shift that had occurred in their marriage over the past 3 years. Marcus had become increasingly distant and critical. He would make subtle comments about Rebecca's appearance, suggesting she needed to lose weight or update her wardrobe. He would dismiss her teaching career as less important than his work in insurance, often saying that she was lucky he made enough money that her salary was just supplemental income rather than necessary for their survival. He had stopped attending school events where Rebecca was being honored, claiming work obligations were more important. Rebecca had tried everything to save her marriage. She had suggested couples counseling, which Marcus had refused, saying there was nothing wrong that Rebecca could not fix by being more supportive and less needy. She had changed her appearance multiple times, hoping to recapture his attention and approval. She had taken on more household responsibilities, even though she worked full-time, trying to reduce any possible source of his complaints. Nothing had worked, and the emotional distance between them had continued to grow. The Family Feud opportunity had come at a particularly difficult time in their marriage. Rebecca's cousin had submitted their family's application months earlier, and when they were selected, Rebecca had seen it as a potential opportunity to reconnect with Marcus. She had hoped that a fun trip together, a shared experience, might remind him of the couple they used to be. Marcus had agreed to come, though he had seemed more interested in the free trip to Los Angeles than in supporting Rebecca's family. What Rebecca did not know, what she had refused to see despite the signs that had been accumulating for over a year, was that Marcus had been having an affair with Danielle Crawford, a 29-year-old marketing coordinator at his insurance company. The affair had started 18 months earlier at a company conference in Miami. Danielle was ambitious, single, and had no qualms about pursuing a married man who could potentially advance her career. Marcus, flattered by the attention of a younger woman and increasingly dissatisfied with what he perceived as the mundane reality of his marriage to Rebecca, had allowed the affair to develop and deepen. Marcus had brought Danielle to the Family Feud taping under the guise of a coincidental meeting of colleagues, but his real motivation was far more calculated and cruel. He had already decided he was going to leave Rebecca. He had already consulted with a divorce attorney. He had already begun moving money into separate accounts that Rebecca knew nothing about. But he wanted to do it in a way that would make Rebecca look like the unreasonable one, the one who could not handle a simple work friendship, the one whose insecurity had destroyed their marriage. He had not counted on being exposed quite so publicly. The Peterson family had performed well throughout the main game, and they had won the right to play fast money. Rebecca's brother had gone first and scored 148 points, which meant Rebecca needed only 52 points to secure the $20,000 prize for their family. As Rebecca approached the fast money podium, she glanced back at the audience area where Marcus and Danielle were sitting. She noticed that they seemed to be sitting closer together than seemed appropriate for work colleagues, and a small knot of anxiety formed in her stomach. But she pushed the feeling aside, telling herself she was being paranoid, that she needed to focus on the game. Steve Harvey approached her with his characteristic warmth and energy. "Rebecca, you ready to bring this home for your family?" he asked with an encouraging smile. Rebecca nodded, taking a deep breath to center herself. "I'm ready, Mr. Harvey. Let's do this." The questions began. Steve asked her to name a reason someone might call in sick to work when they are not really sick. Rebecca answered, "Going to the beach." The survey showed it was the number 3 answer with 18 points. Steve continued, "Name something people put on their hot dogs." Rebecca answered, "Mustard." The number 1 answer appeared with 34 points. The audience applauded, and Rebecca was starting to feel more confident. Then, just as Steve was about to ask the third question, there was a commotion in the audience section. The cameras had not yet cut away from the fast money segment, and the studio's overhead microphones picked up raised voices. Steve paused, looking confused. The production assistant was frantically gesturing, but before anyone could figure out what was happening, Marcus Hamilton stood up in the audience section, his voice loud enough to be heard throughout the studio. "I can't do this anymore," Marcus announced, his words shocking everyone into frozen silence. "I'm done pretending. Rebecca, I want a divorce. I'm in love with Danielle and we're leaving." The studio erupted into gasps and shocked murmurs. Rebecca stood at the podium, her face draining of all color as she processed what she had just heard. Steve Harvey's mouth dropped open in complete disbelief. The cameras captured everything as Marcus took Danielle's hand and began walking toward the exit, apparently intending to simply walk out of the studio and leave his wife standing there in front of hundreds of witnesses and television cameras. But Rebecca's cousin, who had been standing with the rest of the family near the stage, was not about to let this happen without consequence. "You coward!" she shouted at Marcus, her voice carrying across the studio. "You bring your mistress to your wife's moment and announce this here. What kind of man are you?" Security personnel had moved toward Marcus and Danielle, not to stop them from leaving but to manage the disruption and protect the taping. Steve Harvey, recovering from his initial shock, made a decision that would define the moment. He held up his hand to stop the security team and walked directly to Rebecca, who was still standing at the podium, trembling and looking as if she might collapse at any moment. "Hold on, hold on, hold on," Steve said, his voice firm but compassionate. He reached Rebecca and gently took her arm to steady her. "Rebecca, look at me. Look at me, sweetheart." Rebecca turned her tear-filled eyes to Steve, and the pain visible in her expression was devastating to witness. Steve turned to address Marcus, who had paused near the exit, apparently surprised that his dramatic departure was being interrupted. "Marcus Hamilton," Steve said, his voice carrying the weight of moral authority and genuine anger, "I have been hosting this show for years, and I have seen a lot of things. But I have never seen a man display such profound cowardice and cruelty as what you just did. You brought your mistress to watch your wife compete on a game show, and you chose this moment, this public moment, to destroy her." Marcus, clearly not expecting to be challenged, attempted to justify himself. "You don't understand our situation. Rebecca and I have been unhappy for years. I have a right to move on with my life." Steve's response was immediate and fierce. "You have a right to move on. You are absolutely correct about that. But you don't have a right to humiliate and disrespect someone who stood by you for 12 years. You don't have a right to turn what should have been a happy family moment into your personal stage for betrayal. If you wanted to leave your marriage, you should have had the decency to do it in private, with honesty and respect, not like this." The audience erupted in applause for Steve's words, a standing ovation that seemed to shake the studio. Marcus's face reddened with anger and embarrassment. Danielle, apparently realizing that her role in this drama had now been publicly identified and condemned, looked uncomfortable and uncertain. She had likely imagined their relationship as a romantic story of true love conquering all obstacles, not as a sordid affair exposed on national television. Steve turned back to Rebecca, who was now quietly crying, her shoulders shaking with the effort of trying to maintain some composure. "Rebecca," Steve said gently, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. What just happened here is not about you. This is not about your worth or your value or whether you were enough. This is about a man who made a choice to betray his vows and his integrity, and that is entirely on him." Steve then addressed the entire studio, his words deliberate and powerful. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to finish this game. Rebecca is going to complete her fast money round, and she is going to do it with dignity and strength, because that is what strong people do when someone tries to break them. They stand up, they finish what they started, and they show the world that nobody else gets to define their worth." Rebecca wiped her tears, taking several deep breaths. Her family had gathered near the stage, all of them offering support and encouragement. Her mother was crying, her brother looked ready to physically confront Marcus, and her cousins were offering words of love and validation. Steve gave Rebecca a moment to collect herself, and then he asked, "Can you do this? Can you finish these last 3 questions?" Rebecca looked at her family, then at the cameras, then back at Steve. When she spoke, her voice was shaky but determined. "Yes, I can do this. I will do this." The studio audience erupted in supportive applause and cheers. Marcus and Danielle had left the building, their departure barely noticed as everyone's attention focused on Rebecca's courage. Steve returned to his position for the fast money round. "All right, Rebecca. 3 more questions. You've already got 52 points, which means you've already won. But we're going to finish this properly because you deserve to complete what you started." He paused, then added, "And because you are worth so much more than what just happened to you." The 3rd question came. "Name something people are afraid of." Rebecca answered, "Hates." Number 2 answer, 26 points. "Name a place where people meet their spouse." Rebecca answered, "Work." The irony of the answer was not lost on anyone, but it was the number 3 answer with 16 points. Finally, Steve asked, "Name something you might find in a woman's purse." Rebecca answered, "Lipstick." Number 1 answer, 38 points. Rebecca had scored a total of 130, 2 points on her own, bringing the family's combined score to 280 points. They had won $20,000. But the money seemed almost irrelevant in the moment. What mattered was that Rebecca had stood there, in front of everyone who had witnessed her humiliation, and she had finished what she started with grace and dignity. Steve pulled Rebecca into a genuine, fatherly hug. "I am so proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You just showed everyone watching what real strength looks like." He then made an announcement that surprised everyone, including the show's producers. "Rebecca, Family Feud is going to match your family's winnings. We are adding another $20,000 to your prize because you deserve to walk away from this moment knowing that good people recognize your value even when one person failed to do so." The studio erupted again. Rebecca's family rushed onto the stage, embracing her in a group hug that spoke of unconditional love and support. Through her tears, Rebecca managed to say, "Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Thank you for not letting him take this moment from me." When the episode aired 8 weeks later, the response was unprecedented in Family Feud history. The network had to make a decision about whether to air the dramatic interruption and Steve's response, or to edit around it and present a sanitized version of events. Ultimately, with Rebecca's permission and input, they decided to air the truth. Rebecca had been clear in her reasoning. She wanted other women in similar situations to see that betrayal was not the end of their story, that dignity and self-worth could survive even the most public humiliation, and that there were still good people in the world who would stand up for what was right. The clip went viral within hours of airing, accumulating over 100 million views in the first week. News outlets across the country picked up the story. Major morning talk shows invited Rebecca to appear. Social media platforms were flooded with messages of support for Rebecca and condemnation of Marcus's actions. The hashtag that emerged was powerful in its simplicity. Women and men from around the world shared their own stories of betrayal, survival, and rediscovery of self-worth after painful divorces and relationship endings. But the impact went far deeper than viral fame. Within days of the episode airing, Rebecca received thousands of messages from women who had been in similar situations. Some had been betrayed publicly, others privately, but all of them connected with the pain and humiliation Rebecca had experienced and the strength she had shown in response. Many women shared that watching Rebecca finish that fast money round with dignity had given them the courage to leave their own unhealthy relationships, to stand up to partners who had been diminishing their worth, or to simply believe that they could survive betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. The legal aftermath was swift and decisive. Marcus's very public betrayal and the evidence of his long-term affair, now documented on national television, severely weakened his position in the divorce proceedings. Rebecca's attorney was able to secure a settlement that recognized her contributions to the marriage and protected her financial future. The $40,000 from Family Feud, combined with her fair share of marital assets, gave Rebecca the financial foundation to start her new life. But Rebecca was clear in every interview that the money, while helpful, was not the real prize. The real prize was the discovery of her own strength and the outpouring of support from strangers who became friends, from colleagues who rallied around her, and from family who had always seen her worth, even when she had begun to doubt it herself. Steve Harvey invited Rebecca back to his talk show 3 months after the original episode aired. The interview became one of the most watched segments in the show's history. Steve asked Rebecca how she was doing, and her answer resonated with millions of viewers. She explained that the first few weeks after the public betrayal had been incredibly difficult. She had experienced shame, self-doubt, and the urge to hide from the world. But then the messages had started coming in, thousands upon thousands of them, from people sharing their own stories and thanking her for showing them what courage looked like. Rebecca had realized that her pain had purpose. By allowing her story to be told, by choosing dignity over revenge, by finishing that fast money round, even when her world was falling apart, she had given hope to others who were struggling. The elementary school where Rebecca taught had organized a surprise assembly in her honor. Students, parents, and fellow teachers had created cards, letters, and presentations celebrating her strength and character. The superintendent had given a speech about how Rebecca embodied the values the school district wanted to instill in students, including perseverance, integrity, and self-respect. The story took an interesting turn regarding Marcus and Danielle. Within 6 months of the Family Feud episode airing, their relationship had fallen apart. The reality of their affair, stripped of its secrecy and the thrill of betrayal, had proven to be a poor foundation for an actual relationship. Danielle had also discovered, much to her dismay, that Marcus's pattern of criticism and emotional distance was not specific to his marriage with Rebecca, but was actually his fundamental approach to relationships. She had ended the relationship and publicly apologized to Rebecca through a letter that was shared with Rebecca's permission. The apology did not excuse the affair, but it demonstrated growth and accountability that many found meaningful. Marcus himself had faced significant consequences beyond the divorce. The viral nature of his betrayal had affected his professional reputation. Several clients had requested different representatives, expressing discomfort with his character as displayed on national television. His company, while not terminating his employment, had made it clear that his behavior had created problems and that he was being closely monitored. Friends and family members who had witnessed his cruelty had distanced themselves, leaving Marcus isolated and facing the consequences of his choices. 1 year after the Family Feud incident, Rebecca appeared on the show again for a special follow-up segment. The transformation was remarkable. She had lost weight not through criticism and pressure, but through reclaiming her health and well-being on her own terms. She had updated her wardrobe with styles she genuinely loved rather than what someone else deemed acceptable. Most noticeably, she carried herself with a confidence and peace that had been absent during her first appearance. Rebecca shared that she had used the year to focus on personal growth therapy and rediscovering who she was outside of her failed marriage. She had traveled to places she had always wanted to visit, but Marcus had dismissed as uninteresting. She had taken art classes, joined a book club, and volunteered with organizations supporting women leaving difficult relationships. She had even started dating again, though she was clear that she was taking her time and being very intentional about what she would and would not accept in a relationship. The follow-up segment included testimonials from women whose lives had been changed by Rebecca's story. There was the domestic abuse survivor who had found the courage to leave after watching Rebecca stand strong on that stage. There was the woman who had been contemplating suicide after her husband's betrayal, but decided to keep living after seeing Rebecca's resilience. There was the teenage girl who had watched with her mother and learned that a woman's worth was not determined by whether a man chose to value her. Steve Harvey, reflecting on the moment during the follow-up show, shared his own perspective. He explained that in his years of television, he had learned that the most powerful moments were not scripted or planned but were raw, authentic, and revealed fundamental truths about human nature. Marcus's betrayal had been cruel, but the response from Rebecca, from the audience, and from millions of viewers had demonstrated that cruelty could be met with dignity, that betrayal could be survived, and that sometimes the worst moments of our lives could become catalysts for profound transformation. The segment also addressed the broader cultural conversation that Rebecca's story had sparked. Relationship experts discussed the prevalence of infidelity and the particular cruelty of public betrayal. Therapists talked about the psychological impact of humiliation and the process of rebuilding self-esteem after a partner's rejection. Women's advocacy groups highlighted how Rebecca's story illustrated the importance of economic independence and support systems for women leaving marriages. Universities began using the Family Feud clip in psychology and communication courses to discuss topics ranging from crisis response to public humiliation to the role of bystanders in supporting victims of emotional abuse. Marriage counselors reported that couples were bringing up Rebecca's story in sessions as a way to discuss respect, dignity, and the importance of handling relationship endings with integrity. Rebecca herself became an unexpected advocate and speaker. She began working with organizations that supported women going through divorce, particularly those dealing with infidelity and betrayal. She would share her story not as someone who had all the answers, but as someone who had survived and could offer hope that survival was possible. Her message was consistent across every speaking engagement. She would tell audiences that the betrayal was not about their worth or value, that dignity was a choice they could make even in the worst circumstances, and that there was a community of support waiting for anyone brave enough to reach out. 5 years after that October afternoon on Family Feud, Rebecca's life bore little resemblance to the one she had lived with Marcus. She had been promoted to assistant principal at her school, a leadership position that allowed her to impact even more students and teachers. She had published a book titled Finishing the Round, that combined her personal story with practical advice for women rebuilding after betrayal. The book became a bestseller and was being used in support groups across the country. Rebecca had also found love again, this time with a fellow educator who treated her with the respect, partnership, and genuine affection she deserved. They had met at an education conference where Rebecca was speaking about resilience and character education. Their relationship had developed slowly, built on friendship, mutual respect, and shared values. When they married in a small ceremony surrounded by close friends and family, Steve Harvey attended as an honored guest, and he gave a toast that brought everyone to tears. In his toast, Steve reflected on the journey he had witnessed. He talked about meeting Rebecca at her lowest moment and watching her transform pain into purpose, humiliation into healing, and betrayal into a blessing that allowed her to discover her own strength. He reminded everyone that the greatest victories were not about defeating others, but about refusing to let others defeat you, about standing up when everything inside you wanted to collapse, about finishing the round even when someone tried to steal your moment. Rebecca's response to Steve's toast became another widely shared moment. She thanked him for seeing her as a person worthy of defense when she was being treated as disposable. She thanked the audience members who had stood and applauded when she needed to know she was not alone. She thanked the millions of viewers who had sent messages of support and shared their own stories of survival. And she thanked Marcus, a statement that surprised many, for giving her the opportunity to discover who she truly was and what she was truly capable of when everything was stripped away. The legacy of that October afternoon extended far beyond one woman's story. Family Feud itself was changed by the incident. The show implemented new protocols for managing unexpected disruptions and supporting contestants in crisis. Steve Harvey became even more intentional about creating moments of genuine human connection rather than just entertainment. Production staff were trained to recognize signs of distress and to prioritize contestant welfare over television drama. But perhaps the most significant legacy was the conversation the incident sparked about how we treat people when relationships end, about the importance of dignity and respect even in the midst of hurt and disappointment, and about the power of choosing grace over revenge when we have been wronged. Rebecca's choice to finish that fast money round, to accept Steve's support, and to use her pain to help others had created a ripple effect that touched millions of lives. As this remarkable story reaches its conclusion, it is worth reflecting on the lessons that emerged from one of Family Feud's most dramatic moments. Rebecca Hamilton taught us that our worth is not determined by whether someone chooses to value us. She showed us that dignity is not something that can be taken from us, but something we choose to maintain even when others try to strip it away. She demonstrated that the worst moments of our lives can become the catalysts for our greatest growth if we have the courage to stand up, finish what we started, and refuse to let betrayal define our future. Before you go, I want to encourage you to take a moment and think about someone in your life who might be struggling with betrayal, heartbreak, or the loss of a relationship. Reach out to them. Let them know they are not alone. Share this story if you think it might give them hope. And please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you never miss these powerful stories that remind us what really matters in life. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today. Let us create a community of support, one person at a time. Steve Harvey often reflects that the incident with Rebecca Hamilton was one of the most important moments in his career because it reminded him and millions of viewers that television can do more than entertain. It can defend the defenseless, support the hurting, and demonstrate that even in our darkest moments, we are surrounded by people who will stand with us if we are brave enough to keep standing ourselves. The story of a woman whose husband walked out with another woman during her moment of triumph became instead the story of a woman who discovered her own worth, found her own strength, and inspired millions to do the same. That is the real victory. That is what matters. That is the legacy of dignity in the face of betrayal.